Today we are joined by Nancy Lewis and Karen Abbott of Child Nutrition Programs at the Agency of Education and with Jenna. And you've come today because you're wondering about summer food and why is summer food a good idea? What is the need there? As you may know, summer is a time outside of the school year when kids lose access to nutritious school meals that may be available, that are certainly available the rest of the year through the federal programs, the school breakfast program, the national school lunch program, after school snack, after school meals. When kids lose access to this food, the risk for hunger and childhood obesity increases. And summer meals, Nancy, they really support activities programming for children, strengthening attendance. Would you mind talking about the summer slide, the summer learning loss that we see in the research around these programs?
Well, I think in general, did you put a link for people to look at? In general, what that's talking about is cumulative over time, especially for low-income kids. They can see a real difference in things like test scores and whatnot over time from the learning loss that happens when kids aren't involved in activities in the summertime. And it tends to play out more with low-income kids. There are fewer opportunities. So we see the summer food service program as helping support programming for the summer for those kids to make sure they're staying on track with their learning. So when they go back to school in the fall, they're keeping up with their peers. So I don't have actual numbers, but I don't know if you have a way to show people, what the
What we find in the research is that by the time a child enters ninth grade, this summer slide can account for up to 2/3 of the achievement gap in a child's learning. So that's significant, and the difference between having access to food, having access to regular activities and programming throughout one's life can really make a big difference by the time you get to high school. So this is something that we've seen is borne out in research. I'll send out there are definitely some one-page documents that document that. I can send that out with the research. But thanks for speaking on that. It's definitely a big incentive to provide meals to kids. Also, there are advantages to sponsors. The ability to hire year-round staff. These programs provide dollars, not only for meals, but also for staffing, and allow really a continuous flow of federal reimbursements that can provide improved program stability. And the summer food service program, it provides a higher reimbursement rate than some of the other programs. Is that right, Nancy?
Right. There's more money built into the per meal rate for summer food, particularly the summer food service program. I think there are two different meal programs in the summertime, and in general they work the same way, but there's one that reimburses at the same rate as the meals during the school year, and there's one that reimburses higher with an idea that there are more administrative costs. But in reality, we don't see those additional administrative burden quite the same way. So, yeah.
Right. And, finally as well, it provides recognition within the community as a stable source of services, providing meals straight through the year, during the school year, after school, and then in the summer. It's a way to garner community support. It definitely improves visibility. And is a way to maintain strong attendance throughout the entire year. So those are a few of the advantages that sponsors see in running a summer food program. There are also advantages for the community. We've talked clearly about the children that benefit from programming and from meals. Having a reliable partner in child nutrition is a boost to the entire community. It brings federal dollars into the community, which is employment for part of the year for food service staff. And brings it's money saved for families who otherwise are having to find that extra money in an already tight budget to provide meals, which provides important support for summer activities programs that serve families. So I'm going to ask, at this moment, I'm going to ask Nancy and perhaps Karen if she has something to add about the program similarities and the differences. We're going to look at this from 3 different angles. Those who are running area-eligible snacks through the National School Lunch Program, the CACFP area-eligible meal program, and we're going to compare that to the summer food area or site-eligible program. Nancy, would you mind kind of going over this to kind of help some of our participants get an idea of the similarities and differences of these programs?
Sure. So looking at a busy chart, if you look across the top, there are different columns. So an SLP area eligible snack, that's also known as the Afterschool Snack Program, and it reimburses during the school year for meals that are served to kids in enrichment programs after the end of a school day or maybe even on a weekend. So that only happens during the school year, and the same with the CACFP area eligible program. And then we have summer food. So the whole idea today is to kind of get your questions or see where there are areas that you're wondering about how would you make a transition. So you've got those possibilities, either after school snack or CACFP. Both of them may look like after school programs to you, so we could take questions individually if you're not sure which one you're part of. And then transitioning you to that third column. So if you look down on the left, you'll see different dimensions to think about, and you can kind of spot right off if a line goes across all three of those columns, and there aren't really any differences when you move into the summer program. So we look at the maximum age of a child. There's no difference between the three programs. Is individual eligibility needed? No, not necessarily. Summer food, you may make use of individual eligibility. There's more complexity around eligibility with summer food. We can talk about that, but in general, no, it's not required that you know an individual student's eligibility. We can work off poverty or low income percentage for an area or a geographical area or a building. This third block is the place you see the most differences, eligible organizations. So the NSLP area eligible snack, that program is only available to schools who are running that school lunch program. So that's what NSLP is, National School Lunch Program. You can see the other two programs, CACFP area eligible or summer food, can be for school or can be for nonprofits. You'll see that there's this idea that all three of the programs can work in a 50% community, and eligibility, again, is one of the most complicated parts of summer food. So if you have questions about eligibility, I don't know everyone that signed up, but I think most of you are in a low-income community, so you wouldn't have to look any further for information about how kids could get free meals. You'll notice that summer food does not require activities. So if you have a site that's feeding a low-income community, it's not required that you have activities. And that's different than those other two programs that you ran during the school year.
Do you find that having activities helps attendance, Nancy, with the summer program?
Absolutely, and I think we've seen that more recently with the downturn as the economy's gone down and it's getting more expensive for families to put gas in the car and bring kids out just for meals. There may be a reluctance to do that. So depending on what the community is like, if it's walkable or parents have to transport kids, it may make a real difference if there's an activity that the kids are involved in or a program that may go all day. That may make a real difference in an activity rather than just having a drop-in meal where anyone could show up at a particular time. So that's a real consideration when you're designing the summer food program and looking for maybe partnering food with activities. That I think that's always a better way to go.
And then at the bottom we see the reimbursement. As you can see on the bottom right, the reimbursement, actually I put the reimbursement for the summer food service program there, Nancy, which is $202 for breakfast, $354 and half a cent for lunch, $84 for snack. Would you want to talk about some of the reimbursement for the seamless summer option as well?
The seamless summer option is going to follow the same reimbursement rate that the schools get during the school year. And I do not know the rates off the top of my head, but they are different depending on the meal pattern. I think what's important to look at there is the different programs make available different meal patterns or different opportunities for the amount and the types of foods that you'll get reimbursed for. So you can see the area eligible snack, the after school snack program, it just has one meal pattern, one reimbursement rate. For the area eligible program, there's two meal patterns, and then summer has well, the meal pattern for lunch and supper are the same, so it's really 3 different meal patterns and different reimbursement rates.
Right. And is it a simplified summer meal pattern as well, Nancy, compared to the school year?
That's a good question. Yes. So you may or may not be aware, because you may not have had to deal with putting together a meal under the National School Lunch Program, that we have many more requirements now as to the amounts of food, maximums, minimums, looking at calories, fat content, colors of vegetables over the week, the different types of food, whole grain riches. There's a lot of detailed requirements now for the school meal pattern. Those detailed requirements have not come in the same way with these other programs that we're looking at it on this page. That's not to say that they might not in the future, and I think Karen is expecting possibly to see something in the ACFT for new meal patterns in the next year or so. Maybe we don't make any commitments any longer, so we've been just putting So, do you think if they came in, they would affect the area eligible programs that are after? Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. So it's possible we might. I haven't heard any word that we're going to see in the summer food service program new meal patterns. But if you ran that other summer option, the seamless summer, that sounds like it's really easy, and we could talk about the differences. It actually requires you to follow the school year meal pattern, so it's only not so easy.
And if you have questions, we are definitely willing to field those questions. We're going to have a Q&A session as well. Karen?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention was that even if we did have a change in meal pattern, whether it be to summer food and or CACFT, they would be proposed and enacted.
Right, it would take time. So nothing that's going to happen soon. Nothing to impact this summer.
So we could say for summer 2014 it would be a simplified pattern. Okay. And also, Nancy, what meals can be served? Can they serve all of these meals every day?
So again, I think in general with this group that we're talking to, we're talking about serving a site that's in a low-income community, so it's either based on geography or a building, possibly a group of kids. So that would be an open site or a closed enrolled site. Those meals, those 2 types of sites can get reimbursed for 2 meals per day, but the 2 meals can't be lunch and supper. So it could be breakfast and lunch, or breakfast and snack, or lunch and snack. But most common is a breakfast and lunch. If you ran a camp where you're only getting reimbursed for those kids with individual eligibility, and again, I don't think that's what we're looking at for any of the folks that are in the webinar. You could get reimbursed for up to 3 meals per day.
Okay. So most of the people who are signed up today, open sites are going to be?
Yeah, I think we're aiming for open or closed enrolled. Okay. And there's even an overlap in that you are allowed to do a closed enrolled site in open eligible area. The difference with open is that you're saying anyone from the community, whoever shows up, gets a meal, first come, first serve, but you should have enough food available to serve everybody who shows up. And the closed enrolled is a select group of kids. So they're really serving a different group, targeting a different group.
And in terms of gathering information about the students, would there be a difference between open and closed enrolled?
Well, again, it depends. Closed enrolled is allowed to run off the open area of 50% eligibility. So you could close a site in a low-income community without getting any individual student information. That is not typical, though, and we really promote, if you're in a low-income area, that you make meals available to as many kids that need them. That would be the ideal situation. Typically with closed enrolled, what you're doing is collecting individual eligibility information from a core group of kids to figure out if 50% or more of those kids are eligible for free or reduced school meals. So what you're really doing is trying to establish a low-income group of kids. When we work on this, you may not know that if you don't know which kids are enrolled in the program. So you could hover on the line between closed enrolled and camp, and we actually allow up to the first week, through the first week of operation, so you get all that information. But that is that is the difference between open and closed enrollment. Could be relying on individual eligibility.
Right. Okay, that's great. So this is some really good information. These basically, the open, the closed enrollment, and the camp are the three different kinds of summer sites. And for those of you in an over 50% area, based on what Nancy has said, the Agency of Education and we at Hunger Free Vermont, of course, the open site has a lot of advantages in terms of reimbursement and in terms of paperwork that needs to be gathered in order to serve those meals. And so if your community, if your school is above 50% free and reduced, then you are definitely you are eligible to run the open sites this summer. So if this is something that you're thinking about what are the different questions I need to be considering as I'm looking toward running a summer food program, this is just a sponsor self-assessment that we have that actually was developed by Nancy and the Department of Education just to kind of it was developed just to give you an idea of whether or not this would be a good fit for you to consider summer food. Maybe it wasn't Nancy who developed that.
I'm thinking this was Helen Ballard, my predecessor, and I'm noticing it says Vermont Department of Education, so it probably came out of our manual that needs to be updated. We are now Vermont Agency of Education. And I'm also guessing that a lot of this was based on information in the USDA manual. And I know not only there are a number of tools and assessments in that manual that help you get started running the program, but you also at Hunger Free have a planning tool that does ask some similar questions, helps you think through the setup process, and actually that's part of an upcoming webinar,
That's exactly
right.
And we're going to have Q&A here in a minute, but we also want to let you know that this is the beginning of an entire spring webinar series, basically to guide you through the planning and the financial and then the logistical hurdles, the logistical challenges to get you to the point of where you're able to successfully provide meals and to expand a program to feed kids this summer. So this is a basic list of questions just to kind of think about where you're at already in terms of the meals you're serving to kids after school, either through the snack or the meal program, and some of the things that a program would be aiming to do. Yes.
And I also want to point out for this limited group, because there was a select group that was invited here today, you're already doing all of this because you're already getting reimbursed for a meal program. So a lot of these questions are for people starting from scratch to even assess whether they have the capabilities of running a meal program and getting reimbursement and doing the requirements of documentation and following rules and whatnot. So I'm suggesting that you've already made that determination. You're already part of programs with us, so you already know that you have that capability.
So you're saying if you're already running a school snack or after school meal and you're considering a transition, a lot of the pieces are already there.
Right. A lot of it is going to be very, very similar, and it'll be similar types of activities.
Great.
Yeah.
And so also what we'd like to say is that as you're considering it, just to give you a couple of dates, we're going to go through a planning tool in our next webinar, so I don't want to get too far into this. But when do you expect to start receiving letters of intent, Nancy? When do you expect to see, what is the deadline for at least deciding, okay, I'm gonna run a summer site, and then from there working through the necessary paperwork?
So the deadline for an intent is April 15th, but I'm getting them already. I'll take them anytime. I'll take them, anytime during the year. So what that does is start the conversation between us at the Agency of Education and a sponsor or an organization to start going through the pieces and talking through getting you set up and making sure that you have all the training and information and support you need before your program begins. There are pieces that we need to do to get you set up for getting reimbursement within our Agency of Education system, getting money. There are rules for that. Again, with this particular group, they're already getting money from us, so they're already set up. So a lot of the work is already done. It would be a pretty easy transition then to set them up for getting reimbursement from for summer meals. So the idea, one of the things that people aren't always aware of is that there are these different pots of USDA money. So some of the little differences that you're seeing are just that you're tapping into a different pot of money that Congress has allocated, this one being for summer food versus after-school snacks. So we have to just get you tapped into getting.
So even though it's a different program, a lot of the paperwork is going to be stuff that they're very familiar. This audience is very familiar familiar with.
That's
already.
right. I'm thinking a lot of the terminology is just saying things like, meal pattern or production record. Well, I don't know if Karen requires production. Yes, she does. Okay. So some of these things are right. They will already be.
Well, that's great. Let's look at a success story of After School this summer. I was actually talking with someone yesterday who mentioned, who helps run the After School and Summer program at C.T. Smith Elementary in Burlington. And it was interesting in the conversation, she was mentioning that they have after-school meals that are paired with academic enrichment activities. So it's something provided by the school. They benefit from the structure and academic environment of the school to provide meals. In the summertime, it's a little different. The structure is not quite the same. So what they did is they actually developed a partnership with Parks and Recreation and the day camp that they had there that provides arts and crafts, a nature walk, and sports activities. And what we hear and what I heard in that conversation is that, a big part of the successful transition to summer meals is thinking about who a partner would be. Because, the structure is changing, the school day is not there, but there are other things. Are there any examples that you have kind of run into or that come to mind, Nancy?
Well, keeping in mind that the program, the Summer Food Program, reimburses for meals, it doesn't necessarily take into consideration all your costs. So out of that meal reimbursement, you may be able to pay for the cost of your meal and the staff time to construct the meal, but you may not be able to get out transportation monies or supplies or, I don't know, other things that you might want to, an extra person to supervise kids or hiring a special artist, things like that. So people do different things with partnerships. Sometimes the one organization or one group who has a kitchen and can produce meals, so a school maybe, will partner with another organization that's already providing or running some sort of a program, but may or may not be providing meals. So the two working together can come up with more for each individual student, so the kids could get activities and could get meals. There are people so that may be a funded program. There may be some funding from a United Way or a Boys and Girls Club or, different parks and recs. There's different things going on in the community libraries. There's just, when you start thinking about it, there are a lot of different places that do things with kids during the summertime. There are places that use volunteers, too. I'm thinking of down in Lonnie Page, down in the they used, was it the Rotary Club? The Rotary Club. So there were those retired folks to help transport meals. So sometimes you can find people who are either willing to volunteer to help work with the kids or to help with the meals or the serving of the meals or, transporting, whatever. So there are those types of partnerships also. So I think it's a matter of finding out who's doing what already and who has an interest and letting people know what you have for resources, what your capabilities are, and finding a way to then leverage them to come up with more. So this is, this summer food money is about getting more federal money to the state for meals. But there are other monies also out there for people doing activities.
That's true. And just to add to what Nancy was saying, it's definitely true. And we hear people, developing partnerships, especially around volunteering and transportation. Civic organizations like the Rotary Club, oftentimes churches, they may have a van or some kind of vehicle that they're willing to share or even to staff. Libraries, places that already have a commitment to the community that maybe have long-standing funding for those programs. Those are great places to start because, as you mentioned, the Summer Food Service Program, it is about food service. And so putting that with something else that covers the partnership, it creates a real partnership for activities is really helpful.
And there's also the idea of leveraging. So there is a scaling that happens, and it's hard to take advantage of in our small communities in Vermont, but there is an idea of opening one kitchen and hiring, a particular cook or a chef or whatever, that you could get more meals per hour or more meals per site at a lower cost. So we're looking at how to get more meals out into the community for kids with fewer resources, fewer overhead resources, and fewer fixed costs.
And what we find is, especially in rural communities, it really makes sense to benefit from these different institutions that have something to bring to the table. rather than trying to create all of that again, right?
Rather than trying to do it all yourself. I think that's one of the messages here.
That's great. So let's get on to the Q&A. We actually have already had a question come in. If you have another one, please let us know. Just write it down and we will get to it as soon as possible. We have a question here. Is there a different application necessary for MealServe in June 2014 and July 2015? Maybe that was.
So Katie, so hopefully I won't say anything that you don't want us to know, but I understand you're from North Country, and so I think probably behind the scenes is some experience or something you've been doing talking in your district. So in the North Country Supervisory Union, there are people who are running both the Seamless Summer option, which follows the school year. Remember we talked about those pots of money? Well, the school meals program, NSLP, After School Snack, runs on a pot of money that goes from July 1st through June 30th. And the Seamless Summer option, which kind of tacks onto that, also runs during that fiscal year. That's not necessarily a summer food program we're promoting, but that is one of the options. And if you were using that summer food option, you would have 2 different year agreements in our online system. If you go with the summer food service program, that runs on a fiscal year that starts October 1st and ends September 30th. So you would only have one agreement across all the summer months for a given summer. So in 2014, there would just be one online agreement for that time period. So I kind of read a lot into what your question is, so if I didn't quite need it, send us another version of the question.
So thank you very much. That's really helpful. And we do get that question about the idea of seamless summer. The idea of seamless summer option is that it's the National School Lunch Program that continues through the summer. But there is that break. With the Summer Food Service Program, the program runs from October to September, so there is no break during the food service. So that's a good point to bring out. Also want to remind you that in the future webinar, we're going to be addressing some of the planning tools to kind of help you stay ahead of the paperwork, to stay ahead of those requirements, to make sure that this is a very smooth transition. So more questions along those lines will also be covered in the next webinar as well. Do we have other questions that come to mind? Or Jenna, you've been up here listening very, very, very quietly to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you would like to share. No? Okay.
At that point.
Okay.
And people are muted now, but still want to ask questions too. So
that's true. Yeah, let me unmute everyone. So if you would like to just ask your question.
You can hear from them a little bit about what they're.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I really want to know what you all, this is Nancy here, what you all are thinking about for summer and what you see as the challenges to running a summer food program, and what if there's anything we can be doing on our end that would help you with your process.
So I've unmuted everyone. If you would like to just ask us a question, feel free to speak up. We're here to field anything that might come up.
Okay, this is Katie. So I want to follow up with that question. I have I think one site that is a seamless summer option, and I have some others that are not.
I know. You've got quite a confusing situation up there, and you also have North Country Supervisory Union as a sponsor, as well as the hospital. And the hospitals both serve Derby, two different programs at one school. Very confusing administratively. So yeah, there's a bunch to sort out up in your neck of the woods.
So I guess my question is,
in general, people have moved away from the seamless summer option. And I think if, like Debbie Marilyn Lowell, she's been doing seamless summer, she's probably just doing what she's familiar with. But we might encourage her to be able to switch over to the summer food service program if that's going to bring consistency and also additional money. So we've got to figure out what's going to be best for your setup up there.
Okay, are there? Well, let me back up to the timing question. So if a program wants to start in June and they're not a part of Seamless Summer, then they apply under the 13-14, and then we also then apply 14-15. Is that correct?
That's right. If there is, so seamless summer, so that in that name implies some easy transition from the school meals program. That is designed to allow schools who already have inspected facilities and trained food service people to easily run a summer food program without too much ado. It doesn't require annual training. The online agreement is a lot easier, so it tacks right onto the school year online meals agreement. And because that runs in 2 different fiscal years over the summer, we have to have 2 different online 2 years, crossing years. If you haven't been in online system, you don't really know what I'm talking about, but the agreements, the applications, and the agreements that you have with us where we said yes, state agency has said yes, it's okay that you cooperate, are based on a school year or that fiscal year for that pot of money. So with the seamless, it runs across 2 years. There are 2 online agreements, and that makes I think a little extra work, although the amount of information you have to put in the online agreement for seamless summer is pretty small. The other side of that is you're also putting in information. There's just some information that you have to ask that covers all the different meal programs, and it's above and beyond what you have to do for summer food. So,
okay.
The more I think about it, the more it seems confusing. But I think none of this online stuff, I think, is a deal breaker. It just means getting oriented to where you are and what you're doing, and we can always help you over the phone with setup.
Okay. But, so in that, so given that there's different programs going on at different sites, either way, we want the supervisory union to have 2 different years registered, right? To cover everybody's needs.
Sarah, it depends on, are you assuming that somebody's going to run seamless summer?
Well, so I would. So Lowell probably they probably are going to go that way, and then I have a site at J. Westfield, who I'm sure they are. It's the regular food service provider there, and so that might be easier.
We're under the summer food service program. So another thing to think about is when we talk about these agreements, not only do they cross years, but they cross program areas in the system. So you're actually clicking on another part of the online system to get into the summer food service program versus the seamless summer. It's a whole different agreement.
Oh,
so
you would
actually have 3 agreements.
Okay.
And you have 2013-14 for seamless and 2014-15 for seamless. And they can all be under North Country Supervisory Union.
Okay. Okay. And then, okay, so then, and then is it then a separate one for the sites that aren't doing seamless?
The ones that aren't doing seamless would be under, in the online system, it's just the short SFSP, so just the first letters of Summer Food Service Program. So those that aren't doing seamless would be under SFSP, and they would have, the way the agreements work is there's an overall organizational agreement, and then there are, and it asks, some information about the organization, like who's the overall person filing claims, and there's some general questions there. Most of the information goes in on the feeding site. So underneath each organizational agreement, there are individual feeding site agreements, places that the meals are actually served. So you would have each of the individual sites would then have information under the Summer Food Service Program.
Okay.
Just different levels of the agreement when you get in.
Katie, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I know you had also mentioned the approach that you were considering about serving different towns and maybe having different meals served at different places. Did you have any questions about that as well?
I can follow up. Yeah, I do. So I have some collaboration going on with summer programs in that under one program they are in 2 different sites. And so I was wondering if there's a minimum number of meals that have to be served to be under the summer food service program.
Nope, no minimum. You can serve 1 day a week, 1 day a month, 1 day, period, over the whole summer.
So and as long as you just list those in your advertisement, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing in the online, what we're approving in there, and this is something we would get into as you get set up, you're for each meal location, you're putting in when you think that's going to operate, the meals that you're going to serve, and the maximum number of kids that you expect to serve at that site. And so we're approving, the idea of the agreement and what USDA wants us to do is for us to give, we're saying, we're granting or we're somehow blessing that, yes, you've got the capacity to do this. We've, gathered enough information to feel good about allowing you to serve whatever it is you're saying there. So when you're putting a certain number in, if you put 1 million kids in, I would probably not approve you to serve 1 million kids in, Troy. So it's that sort of a thing that where, we have a certain responsibility as a state agency to say, yeah, we really, we're approving them to run, and that we believe they have the capacity to execute the program.
So you're saying once they've shown that they correspond to the criteria of the program and that they've shown that they have the capacity to serve meals,
yeah.
whether they're able to run for a week or 5 weeks or 7 weeks,
right.
There's not a difference.
Right. There's no minimum. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Katie?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions? Everyone is still unmuted. So does anyone else have questions or another one?
What are we not saying? What were you wondering about that we didn't quite touch on? Is there something else we can get into with our time here?
What about transporting meals? Like field trips, like bag collection.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, field trips are allowed, and the way that we handle that, because as we've talked about, you're determining eligibility for the free and reduced, or the eligibility has to do with the percentage of meals that are going to get reimbursed at the rate. So there's only one rate in the summer food. Only you either get reimbursed for a meal or you don't. So when you have a low-income site, all of the meals at your site are reimbursed, and that low-incomeness is dependent on, a community census or something, or claims coming in from the school during the school year, something saying that that community is a low-income community. So it's really geographically based. And so when you're doing a field trip, you may be taking kids out of that geographic area. So yes, you're allowed to do that. If you were every day in a different geographic area, then that may be a little tricky, because we're trying to really serve low-income kids. So we'd be asking questions about that. But in general, what happens is you set up your site at your base geographic area, and then there's a form that you can send in to tell us you're going to be off-site on these different days. And we, pretty much grant and say, yes, you can serve these meals at these alternate sites. You need to make sure you still follow the meal patterns. Part of the idea of communicating with us is if we're planning to do a visit, so we have to review a certain number of sites every year. If we're doing a visit or USDA wanted to come drop in or something, they would want to know that the kids aren't going to be there that particular day. So that's part of it. But also we're supposed to be giving you permission to do anything that alters from that online agreement that you're setting up. So in the online agreement, you only get to say one location. So with that the request for approval for a field trip, we're granting you permission to do those off-site meals. And all of these forms and things are available on our summer food page. So I usually just do a Google search of summer food Vermont, and I get to our Agency of Education page, and there's a timeline there, forms required at the different timelines, and then those other miscellaneous forms like you're talking about, like asking to go on a field trip or asking a school for data, or there's just a bunch of different things there. So all the forms that you would need for running summer food are on that summer food page.
And I've seen the page that Nancy referred to. You click on it, and a Word document will pop up on your computer, and they can just fill that out and email it back to you, Nancy?
That's right, yeah. They can email attach it, they can fax it back. Paper mail is pretty slow, but we do get stuff that comes in paper mail.
And you need 1 week advance notice for a field trip?
It should be approved by me before you actually go on the field trip. So yeah, we'd be great.
Okay.
So on the field trip days,
That generous timeline.
That's great. So that's really helpful. And also, just so you know, speaking of all those planning tools that are really helpful as you begin to really transition into summer, we're going to have on March 20th a second webinar on planning your summer meal program. And we're going to actually use a tool that you developed with Amanda Karen from Vermont. And so that's a really helpful tool to kind of see where you're at and which documents, where you're at in the process of becoming a sponsor.
Or maybe even a checklist. I haven't looked at it recently, but it would help them maybe have a to-do list of what's outstanding for this year. That might be helpful.
Right.
Really do it once a year. I forget.
So this tool is going to be something that we're going to present again together next month. And it's going to be something to really take some of the guesswork out of this, to make it easier to see where you're at in the process, any questions you might have to kind of orient you. And as you mentioned, Nancy, you're available, I'm available. We are here to make this process as smooth as possible.
Right. So we really try to be flexible and tailor different trainings or support as people need them. So to talk about training, the Summer Food Service Program does require annual training. To help towards that, we have a conference every year in the springtime, and typically it's been in conjunction with the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and this year it's in conjunction with even more programs and more states. So we're having a larger called Tri-State Conference with all of our meal programs, and it will have a number of summer food sessions, and that is April 10th in Killington. So that's one way to take care of your annual training. For new sponsors, for people who are getting set up for the first time, we typically handle training one-to-one by visiting the site, because often the requirement from USDA, depending on the type of new sponsor, is that we visit the site before it begins operations. And we usually use that visit to help people get set up in the system and also talk through all the requirements of the program. So for brand new people, we typically do one-to-one training. For folks like North Country, okay, so that's an existing sponsor. The training requirement is basically saying at least one person, so it could be just one person from the sponsor, is required to go every year, and then they, theoretically are responsible for training all the other people. So it can be as few as one people, or you can send as many people as possible. And when you eventually get to the forms on our website that help with running a summer food program, you will see a training plan there. It actually lists out different training topics depending on the role of an individual. So if you had somebody that was just serving meals versus somebody that was filing a claim, there are different roles, different levels of information that you need to get trained on or to make sure that your staff knows about. So we're trying to even help think through at that level. But we are having a conference. Lots of people like to go to the conference because you get to talk to so many other sponsors about what they're doing. You get lots of ideas, and the group workshops are fun, and it's fun. But
and you find that's really encouraging for different sponsors to be able to
we have
ideas?
Yeah, we have folks that just look forward to it every year, and they ask me. Some have already asked me when's it going to be, and so yeah, conference, that's a really good way to get a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. And make contacts, find other people who are in similar situations, who are solve problems that you may be encountering, and to have sort of your support group or your your peer group that you can call on when you have questions and that can help you get up to speed.
And you mentioned it's April 10th, so it leaves time to integrate those lessons, those things that you learned into your planning for the program.
That's right. That's right. And we like people to come and also share about what they're doing. So it's not only a time to receive information, but also to share what you're doing to help other people learn. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, once again, join us on March 20th. We'll continue this conversation, a guide to planning your summer food program. I will send out an email list to those of you who participated, along with some of the other research about summer achievement and the importance of food. Yeah, definitely. I'll send some of that information. And all of you who attend will definitely receive an invitation to the next webinar.
And what's that learning day that we're going to have a table at tomorrow morning?
Oh, that's right.
That's there.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow, Vermont Afterschool is having a big conference, and they're going to be convening leaders from Afterschool, many providers for after-school snack, after-school meals, and then enrichment and activity programming will be present. It's being sponsored by Vermont Afterschool. It's going to be at the Capitol Plaza Hotel in Montpelier, and we'll be sharing a table. Hunger Free Vermont will be sharing a table with Child Nutrition Programs, Agency of Education, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of people there.
Yeah, me too. And so that would be an opportunity to come see our smiling faces if you haven't already met them, that we would be there and available to answer questions in person, and we'll have some materials and whatever. So just another way to connect.
That's great. Thank you for reminding me. I hadn't thought about that.
You better remember because it's
yeah, I will. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I would just really like to thank Nancy for coming.
Thanks, dear.
Yeah, and Karen, thank you for being here as well. And yeah, and Jenna, thank you. And for those of you who attended, we look forward to seeing you again on March 20th. Again, before then, feel free to contact any of us with your questions. We'll be more than happy to help. Have a nice day.
Thank you.